You can begin at any time.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Planning Advisory Committee meeting. Today, of course, June 24th. And if I could call the meeting to order. With that, could I have and maybe have everyone go on mute until it's time that you would like to speak? That would be great. Thank you. Approval of the agenda. Could I have somebody approve that, move that, please? Thank you, Leanne. Seconded. Thanks, Jim. And moving right along. Oh, sorry. All in favor? Thank you. Moving right along, it would be number 3 on the agenda, declarations of interest. Does anyone have, Councillor Burton?
Yes, I do. I live around the corner and I received a letter, so I will be declaring a conflict at this time. Okay,
so when we get to that portion, yep, you know the drill. Thank you very much. And minutes of the previous meeting. Hopefully everybody had a chance to read them over. If I could have somebody move that, please, as that the Planning Advisory Committee meetings minutes dated May 27th, 2020 be accepted as presented. Moved by Jim, seconded by Mayor Todd. All in favor? Great, thank you. Now we only have one report on this planning committee agenda, and it's report 03/2020, the proposed zoning bylaw amendment concerning 481 Macaulay Road. Recommendation that the Planning Advisory Committee recommend that Council adopt a zoning bylaw amendment under Section 34 of the Planning Act to allow for boarding or kenneling of animals in the residential zone R1 at 48 Macaulay Road, Prescott. If I could have somebody move that for discussion purposes, please. Jim and Mayor Todd seconded. And I believe, Leanne, now that this is the item that you're declaring an interest on, correct?
that is correct.
Okay, and I believe then now our CAO will mute your mic. Is that correct, Matthew?
Well, I can mute my mic.
Oh, you can do it, Leanne. Thank you. Mr. Merriman, could you speak to this report?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. In early February, staff were made aware of a small pet boarding service occurring at 481 Macaulay. A quick follow-up with the owners confirmed this to be the case, and they were unaware that it had issues in relation to the zoning bylaw. We spoke with them and they submitted, as you can see, by February 14th, so not even halfway through the month, we had received an application from them for reconsideration for rezoning. The application was circulated to all the departments in the town, and other than bylaw, no other departments had concerns. With the concerns that bylaw had, we felt that they could probably be addressed through if it was approved through a bylaw. As you are aware, this meeting was originally scheduled for March 18th. I bring this up so that there's documentation showing that we had originally, planned to follow the requirements. Unfortunately, due to the provincial emergency, it had to be canceled at the time because at that time, all meetings had to be done in person. Once the province got around to allowing electronic meetings and stuff like that, especially as it related to the planning department, this meeting was rescheduled and notices were all resent again to all the various people that were affected, and the property was reposted. Now, when I first wrote this report, I had a grand total of 2 written responses with concerns and 5 people in 5 written responses in support. Since that time, there has been additional things that have come in. In fact, it's interesting. I did write in my report several telephone inquiries had came in, roughly 50, like in relation to the stuff. And I would suspect now just about everyone that I've had a conversation with has submitted a report. I'm sorry. My voice is fading away apparently when I turn my head to look at my report. I'll try to, is that better?
That's fine. That's good. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm still getting used to Zoom too, everyone. So basically, it was resent out to all the members this afternoon. We are now up to 15 responses that were in support of the thing, but of which 5 were what I would call in the immediate neighborhood. 12 were in the greater neighborhood, meeting like fairly close, like all in Prescott and, in a residential zone, and 3 came from actually outside of Prescott, although it was fairly close at Riverview Heights. I mean, it's just over the border. But they were noted where they came from. I had also received a grand total of 5 written responses with concerns. So when we get into the official plan analysis, it is important to remember what the official plan is. The official plan is not actually a legislation, but it is very valuable to all the legislation that we pass. It basically sets the basis from which we deem or pull the the legislation from when we set things like zoning bylaws and do things, any sort of bylaw when we set things up. The guiding principles in relation to the town is making sure that we carefully manage a sustainable residential and economic growth and strive to achieve a sense of place that's respectful of our unique historical, cultural, and natural heritage, where our citizens can enjoy an unparalleled quality of life. And the guiding principles, including the fact that we want to be progressive, but still recognize that everyone needs to work together. And like I say, we want a balanced mix. We don't want one thing too much over the other. We're looking for balance. And then the last part of the official plan that's important is we will ensure appropriate development which will not pose a danger to public safety or health or result in negative property or environmental impacts. The principles which guide land use decisions over the lifespan of this plan will be anchored in our strategic plan, which stresses integrity, accountability, service, leadership, transparent communication, and a commitment to growth. So we have several tools that help us. Also in the official plan, it talks about residential development. 2.2 is very specific into where the residential development will not only be, but how it should be. It should be affordable, safe, and accessible and meet the needs of the entire community. And one of the things that's interesting in the official plan is 2.2.2, which is the policy, which says permit small scale neighborhood serving commercial uses, such as corner stores, small scale institutional uses, such as schools, parks, libraries. I mean, that's home occupations and other non-residential uses in a residential, provided that they are compatible and complementary to the neighborhood. So from these things, we actually go into the zoning bylaw, in which the zoning bylaw talks about some very specific things, including the fact that our definition of a kennel shall mean a building or structure where animals, birds, or other livestock intended or used as domestic household pets or for working or sporting purposes and are kept or boarded. So in this case, it's according to our zoning, it is what we would call equal to a kennel. I still don't know I'd call it a kennel, but it falls under the definition there. Okay, and then when we get into 4.22, which is of the zoning, which discusses all the home-based business requirements. It actually meets basically everything that we have in our home-based business requirements, except for one very important thing. Home bases shall be limited to a number, a percentage of the house. It's worked on by basically one or two people. It's clearly secondary to the use of the house. Like I say, all that stuff, in this case, the application does meet. However, in section E, the uses shall include a studio, but does not include or permit a clinic, retail, or wholesale store or vending outlet, restaurant, convalescent home, kennel, or animal shelter. Okay, veterinary establishment, multiple chair hairdresser or barber, arcade, funeral parlors and stuff. So whenever any one of those things come up, we actually have to take it to rezoning because we're looking to go outside the norm. And the reason why they're there is because it's very easy for any sort of establishment such as this to become big and over controlling. One of the things that you look at in the official plan when you're going through it, and it's really what's kind of the most important part of the official plan and what the report wants to address, is the fact that any home business that we have should not create, and I want to find the exact wording if I can, just give me 2 seconds. The use does not create or become a public nuisance with regard to noise, odor, traffic, parking, or signage. Okay, everything else is actually fairly clear. This use is definitely incidental or secondary. It's not going to change the dwelling because it's we're not building anything extra with it. There's no goods or wares displayed outside for sale. And the use is carried out by a resident of the dwelling. So all that is left, and it is a very important part, is that the use does not become a public nuisance with regard to noise, odor, traffic, parking, or signage. So when bylaw went through all those things, parking was not an issue. There was adequate parking not only on site, but also in the local area, I think on the streets. There is no doubt that there is 2 schools there that would certainly make it busy at certain times of the day, but overall, parking is not an issue, especially with the size of the driveway that was on the site. Signage was not a problem neither because there's no intent by the applicant to ever put up a great big neon sign or anything like that. And as to noise and odor, because they intended on keeping it inside the house, the pet boarding, and simply taking them out for walks the way any other good pet owner would do so, it was deemed that it could be mitigated and controlled. Staff is recommending that the zoning amendment be approved. However, I would like to address some of the things, not so much the people that support it, because in the end, they were fairly short and they're just to the point that they supported the application. Out of the ones that had concerns, most of the concerns related to specifically that. There was a couple people that said in their concerns that there was too many dogs, and then other people that said there was no dogs and they didn't want any. So those I don't think an extra few dogs in the neighborhood occasionally is going to be that much noticeable, but a lot of them did have concerns about the dogs being left outside all the time. So the question would be, I would guess, to the thing, if we did wish to approve it, would there be anything else in the bylaw that we would like to add as an additional condition to make sure that it doesn't become a cement pad outside the house that has 20 cages that, I guess that would be my question to the committee. I have placed in the bylaw itself an allowance of up to 6 animals. The reason being that if you're a house, you would be normally allowed the 2, and then the 4 that's being requested for the pet boarding services. Part of the reason why I suggested that we settle on 4 when I was talking with the applicants, because they actually indicated that they might be, they couldn't see more than 2 or 3 at any given time. My concern was that if someone drops an animal off slightly earlier, someone picks up one slightly late, we may end up with 1 extra there for smidgen, And I didn't want someone feeling like, oh, see, they're way over the, they're over the amount that they're allowed. The reason why we added dog tags to the bylaw is so that as some of the people that had concerns that the pets might be skittish and might want to bolt, was the same reason we always want to have dog tags, to safely get the animals back to where they belong. And as the person has taken the veterinary training, we felt that she would be, don't get me wrong, she's not going to go out and say, I want the worst dog out there. But if should a dog come into the house and she finds out that, it has not a great disposition, she would simply notify the town, and she would also take steps at the house to make sure that the dog remains under control.
Okay, well, I think, Sean, I think we covered most of everything, but you will be available for questions if need be.
Yes.
Thank you. If I may just interrupt before we proceed, our clerk, Kim, can I just get a clarifying procedural issue clarified for me? I see there's people in the audience that may or may not want to speak. Is it appropriate timing to have them speak now before the committee comments? Or
Definitely. I think now is the appropriate time to ask if members of the public would like to provide their comments, or the applicants in this case.
okay, very good. With that, okay, our CEO, Mr. Armstrong.
So I would suggest having the applicant speak
First.
to clarify any further points, and then have anyone in the audience that wishes to speak can do so after that.
Very good. Thank you for that direction. With that being the case, I am believing that the Smiths are in the audience, and if they would like to speak for just a couple of minutes about this, that will be great as you are the applicant.
Okay, hi. We're Tracy and David Smith. CJ, we let the town office know she just got a new job actually on Monday. So today was only her second shift, and she asked her boss if she could Zoom in, and the boss said, go ahead, you can take 15 minutes right now. But her 15 minutes was up, so she had to get back to work. So otherwise she'd be saying hi. Anyway, so yes, CJ went to St. Lawrence College and got her vet assistant certificate. And the job market's very small around here. She's been applying for jobs for over a year. She wanted to put her services to good work if she could, and offer to pet sit. A lot of people in Prescott actually do pet sit. When their sister or neighbor or somebody goes away, they look after their dog in the house. That was what she wanted to do. And she then, when she had to sign up and received a dog, somebody, I guess, said that we had to apply for a license for the kennel. Her intention is not to build a kennel. There's no cages also intended. There is no dogs left sitting outside intended. She has had dogs here, and it's gone very well. She takes the dogs out for potty breaks on demand, and she walks them twice a day. And otherwise, they're in a soundproof, temperature-controlled environment, which is our house. And that was her intention all along, to provide a service for people in Prescott whose animals don't kennel well and who don't cage well when they go on holiday. Some animals pine. Looking at cats or dogs, yes, 2 was the thought at a time. But as Sean said, yeah, it could happen that when somebody's dropping off a dog, there may be, a dog already here or something. Or you may have a mother with puppies or something like that. So there would be, 2 tiny dogs. She cleans up after them and, of course, walks them on a leash, even in the middle of the night if they need a potty break. We don't just open the door and let them go. She puts them on a leash and takes them out. We have a great relationship with our neighbors, and we talk to the neighbors on both sides of our house, and they seem to be fine and in agreement with what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I just add that we're very sensitive about the concerns of people, and we don't want to have a bad relationship with our neighbors. We don't want to create a nuisance of any kind. And really, I think what we're doing is the equivalent of what we would do if we had our own dogs. We did have a dog up until last year. We lost her, and but she was in the house and she was walked, and never a nuisance to anybody. And that's basically what we're trying to do for other people's dogs.
Very good. Thank you. Now, does any of the committee members, now that the Smiths are unmuted, have any questions for them? I do, if you don't mind, Tracy, David. I did walk by your place the other day, just as part of my preparation. Your backyard, it's not fenced, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and I'm on the business Facebook page. We are making references to leashes and dogs and whatnot, but it featured a time of rabbits as well. So she offers any type of pet?
At this time, I don't think we would say any kind of pet, but domestic. So yeah, there are 2 rabbits at present in a special room, and they also are, safe and secure behind child gates and behind closed doors.
Okay, thank you. Jim, Brett, do you have any questions for the applicants?
I have no questions at this time. I'll have some comments later, Chair, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, is anyone wanting to speak on this topic as a non-committee member? Leanne?
Thank you, even though I'm on the committee, but I've declared an declaration of interest tonight. So I understand that you've been running the kennel for almost a year now.
Is it about a year? I'm trying to think. I don't think it's almost a year, actually.
I can comment, the Facebook page suggests about December, if that helps.
Okay.
And you're looking at just small dogs?
No, I would say that we have had what's called a medium dog. But all dogs, she refuses the right to take in a dog that we don't think would be appropriate.
Okay.
Okay.
Teresa, I'm not done, but Matthew would like to speak.
Oh, sorry. Yes, Matthew?
So normally in this particular situation, anybody that's talking about an interest in this particular thing would address all their comments to the committee as opposed to asking the applicants. So just wanted to make that clarification.
Very good. Thank you. Okay.
If I
You can ask the questions too.
Just,
continue,
okay.
can I ask the committee then? Or address my comments to the committee?
Certainly.
Okay, thank you. So the yard is not fenced in, that's, and the barking of the dogs, if you have more than one, how are you gonna exercise them? You mentioned that you were gonna walk them. I'd like to hear, if I may, all the comments that were against. I understand that some of the supporting letters were ones that don't even live in the neighborhood. Alta Vista is the other side of town. And a few other questions, if I may. I understand that we received a letter as a neighbor, but the neighbor right beside me did not receive a letter. Did the letters go to people on Churchill Road that is going to be affected by this as well? So Woodland, Macaulay boundary, and Churchill Road is the square that all these that may be affected by the noise. It is a school zone. You know, what if one of the dogs gets out and unfortunately goes into the school zone area.
Okay,
Thank you.
very good, thank you. And with that being the case now, committee members, Mayor Todd, Jim Hutton, if you have any other questions for our staff or comments or concerns, this would be a good time to start that conversation. Jim, thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, when I first saw the notice come through, I have some concern about the use. I certainly appreciate Sean's report. The official plan, as Sean mentions noise in the official plan. The zoning bylaw in terms of a home occupation also mentions noise and nuisance. So there is a potential for that in the neighborhood. You'll note in the zoning bylaw, Sean mentioned the kennels is defined. The kennels are permitted in a general industrial zone in the zoning bylaw for the town, and that's for an obvious reason. So there are some concern. I do have some concerns about impacts on neighbors. I'm very glad to hear the applicant say that it's going to be in the house. I'd be very concerned if there were outdoor runs for dogs and everything, because I think that would be a real potential for noise for neighbors. So that gave me some pause to lessen my concern somewhat. 6, I think, is a perhaps quite a number. Perhaps 4 might be better. I do certainly appreciate that some neighbors. I did read the letters that came in, and I have to say that I might share some of their concerns. There is, I guess, if we get to the end and there is, the committee does feel there's concern. It's not on the table now, but there's other mechanism. I'd like to know the mechanisms for sure that Sean feels can control, if it is approved, control the potential impacts on abutting property owners. And I may know one now. Actually, there's a temporary use bylaw under the Planning Act, Section 39, that allows uses for up to 3 years maximum. And that way, a temporary use bylaw might allow the use to be assessed, and if it's appropriate, then perhaps it could be made permanent or not. And but it would give an opportunity to kind of test drive the situation. I'll stop there, but I do take comfort in the fact that there's going to be no outdoor runs. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Brett, unless you're eager to speak right now, I just have a couple questions too, if that's okay. Sean, if I was to babysit my sister's 2 dogs and I had a dog of my own, would that not be in contrary to our bylaw of having just 2 dogs? Even if I was just babysitting for the week, I'm sure we would have high tolerance, but it is over the bylaw, right?
That is correct. I mean, the animal control bylaw states that a household should not have more than 2 dogs in it. Having said that, there is numerous places in town where it can be demonstrated that due to various factors, including new marriages that bring 2 families together, children moving,
Right.
the most that I've ever seen in one household that we were aware of, and I'm not saying there's not more, but was 5, where we approved it for 5. And in the case, it was a case of 2 people getting married. They both had their own dogs. And then I can't remember which mother or mother-in-law passed away, and they ended up with a 5th one for a short while. Like I say, our animal control bylaw, is kind of like our zoning, is meant to give guidance. It's not meant to be absolute. And when someone wants to do something outside the normal realm, we do something like this. We have a meeting and we discuss it to see if in the individual circumstance, it could be allowed. Jim is correct about the temporary use bylaw. And as for the other thing for Leanne, if I may, Madam Chair, she had indicated that she was concerned that the some people weren't notified. All I can tell you is that every property that we had within the 60-meter buffer was notified. Like, you know, a letter was sent out, whether or not they got it.
Okay, thank you. I meant to follow up on that, so thank you for that. Along with the nuisance and the odor and the traffic and the parking and the signage, would you consider 4.22 bracket C, bracket III, the one that makes reference to the 35% cannot be no more than 35% of the gross floor area? Would that be a little bit of a concern as well?
No, in this case, it's not. I mean, the areas that have been set aside are basically just a room or so. Although I'm sure they're treating it like a family and allowing it to wander through the house, so the actual area that's assigned for running the business is less than 35%.
Okay. And if I may, Mayor Todd, can I ask you a question? Just because I think you're the only one that might be in the audience that was here. At one time, the town had someone not in compliance with our bylaw because on the west end, due to having chickens, because that was their passion and they were supporting their income with the eggs and that kind of thing. I didn't dream that happened.
Yeah, it actually, I think the first request would probably go back. This is almost a decade old now, but it has come up at different times as well, where there have been, I think, inquiries made, but we actually had a formal request. I'm going to say 2011, 2012. It was quite some time ago now. It was definitely in my first term because Mel Campbell was still Reeve Augusta at the time, and I spoke to him a little about that with some of his experiences with chickens, of course, with his farming operation, and he provided a little bit of insight. So yeah, we did turn it down at the time simply because of concerns about storage of feed, possible vermin into the feed, and there were a lot of concerns there, but and that just sort of died away. Another, I think Kingston has it on the books, and a number of larger municipalities do operate that, but there are also municipalities with larger bylaw enforcement employee departments, so they can actually, there's a little more ability to look after it. So we did turn that down at the time, and I wouldn't say it's a similar request here though at all, but it did show that we were sticking to the bylaw at the time, and we weren't looking at at site-specific exceptions or overall exceptions.
Okay. And Matthew, if I could have one question to you. I feel, if I could get your comments on this, I feel we may not have adequate staff to necessarily, we're a small municipality, so we don't necessarily have adequate staff to often enforce our own bylaw. In this case, it would be our 2 pets, right, per household, let alone adequate staff to monitor site like a special thing. What would your comments be to that?
So like many municipalities, the town of Prescott works on based on complaints. And so absolutely any complaint that we receive in relation to a town bylaw and whether it's being adhered to, we follow up on. In terms of active enforcement, we, as I mentioned, tend to work on the complaint basis, but certainly we don't make an active round of ensuring that every single household only has two pets or that sort of thing. But certainly if a complaint is received, then we would address it in a timely manner.
Thank you. Any comments now, Mayor Todd or Jim again?
Yeah, I do, Madam Chair, if I could. Just start off with, I'm a little uncomfortable just about the overall discussion here for a couple of reasons I'm not going to get into, but I will just speak for my own take on this. Like yourself, I did go by the residence the last couple of days just assess it, and I do have a tremendous respect, of course, for Tracy and David, the whole Smith family. They're a big part of Prescott through their work with the church, of course. And I'm sure they would absolutely run this business to the highest standards of care for the animals and concern for their neighbors. With that said, there's a but coming. And this is something, it's a difficult decision for me, simply because I think this is a service that is needed in town. I think it's you've got the right people running it, and you've got something that I think could be well received by a number of people in Prescott. But the problem I have with it is just from the planning perspective, because really it really isn't a discussion about the sites, the specific site, or even the operators. It opens up the possibility for further applications across Prescott for these sorts of services, such as whether it's dog walking, whether it's kenneling, and so on and so forth. Site-specific zoning and goes back to my early time on council, when I'm really starting to become acquainted with bylaws and planning and how the system should work. And I've always operated under the belief that was informed by numerous planning consultants. Site-specific zoning is something you want to avoid as much as possible, because even if you're looking at that site-specific use, it's okay if it's grandfathered in. I mean, we've had certain situations like that for years in town, decades, many of which were cleared up under the last full review and rewrite of the zoning bylaw back in, oh God, I think that was 2008 or so. It's quite some time ago. We did the last full one. But anyways, long story short, the problem I have with site-specific zoning for a new use is it basically undercuts the overall bylaw, and it establishes that use in Prescott. And obviously we could have numerous applications coming forward using this as a as the pretext and as a basis for their own application. So if we're going to entertain something like this, I don't believe it should be site specific. I think we have to look at it to add it to the bylaw overall and establish proper procedures, distances. I mean, there's a lot more that goes into it. So just establishing this as a one-off, site specific and based on the very good people that are operating the service is very tough for me to okay, because I do regard that as, and no offense, Sean, I can see you're scrunching up the brow there a little bit, but I do appreciate your take on this, but I don't look at that as it causes issues with overall planning, and I think it could cause some further applications along this line elsewhere in town. And quite frankly, there's a reason why the use wasn't permitted when the bylaw was done in the first place. So if we're going to look at it for this site-specific use, I think we have to look at it in a more broad base for the entire community, because I do think there's enough need for this and enough demand for this service that we could get others applying, and they may not come with the same care and attention that the Smiths obviously show for their animals and for the community at large. And then when you throw in some of the other concerns, they're not as serious as the planning thing, because I do wonder about this opening up other issues. The lack of the fenced yard is a bit of a concern for me as well. That could be a potential issue. You do have the school right across the street as well, and you obviously you're not going to know every animal when they come in, so there's always a little bit of the unknown there. And then we do, of course, have a significant number of concerns from close by neighbors. I read a few more just today as well. So I think that also has to be looked at. So it's very difficult for me to support this, and I hate coming to that conclusion, because I do think it's a good service. I do think it's something needed around Prescott, maybe not right in Prescott. And I do think a great deal of the people that are supporting this and offering this service in their home, and I know they would do the very best to look after the neighbors and the noise concerns and so forth. But it's really tough for me to support, just because I think it will open up other avenues, other applications, and I don't think this is the way to go about this at this time. So I don't think I'll be able to support this. And I say that with some amount of regret, but given those reasons, planning, neighbors, I think it's a difficult one to support at this time. Perhaps it's something that we could look at on a more community basis when we do the full review of the zoning bylaw, which I believe is, Matthew, please, that's scheduled for right after the official plan review, is it not, sort of in concert? So that'll be next year or thereabouts, I would guess, with COVID now, or maybe even later this fall, fingers crossed. So it's a very tough one for me to support. And I do apologize to that, for that opinion to an extent, because I hate anything that actually impacts on someone trying to be an entrepreneur. But this is just a tough one for me for the reasons that I mentioned. So I don't think I'll be able to support this evening.
Thank you. And I was interested, Sean, in when you were describing your report of the people who did support this. Only one was from Macaulay Road that I could tell, and very few, like a couple, the minority were weren't the immediate area. Unlike those who opposed were the immediate, all of them were the immediate area. And I couldn't help but underline one of them that opposed. One of their lines kind of said a lot to me. And so I'm going to read it to you. And it says, a person purchasing property within the town, especially in the R1 zone, has some sort of reasonable expectation that this type of situation doesn't occur. So a little bit of a response to Brett's idea of having it be part of our revised official plan. That would involve public engagement. So that would give people an opportunity. So we can't ignore the immediate letters we received from the immediate area with real concerns. As much as I agree with everybody's opinion of the applicant, I applaud her efforts, I applaud her passion, but what about the next applicant who wants to do that, right? Are we going to monitor then that situation too with not an abundance of staff? Are we going to trust that they too have a common sense approach to this? That's a lot to ask of this committee, in my opinion. Do you have any more? That's a closing comment from me. Do you have any closing comments, Jim?
No, I don't, Chair. Thank you very much.
Okay. So should we at this time entertain a vote, although it doesn't appear that it's going to be favorable, or could we, does the committee want to entertain perhaps a deferral of this? Can I get it? Oh, sorry, Kim, you are moving up and down.
The motion was put on the table in Sean's report. So there's a couple options. You could withdraw that and maybe entertain another option. You could defer it. You could even amend that motion if you wanted to deny tonight. Any recommendation that you make will rise to council though as well.
Okay. So if I could get your opinions, Brett and Jim, on what, if we want to just keep it as the motion as it stands and vote on it?
I would suggest proceeding with that rather than a deferral or another option. Just my own personal belief, simply because I think there does need to be some sort of definitive answer for the residents that have been concerned, and also for our bylaw department that's obviously spent some time working on this. Not to say there isn't the possibility of bringing something back at some point with regards to some of the parameters I mentioned, with regards to the OP, to the review of the bylaw itself, and possibly including this as a permitted use in parts of town. But that I would suggest there's some definitive response here. But I see our clerk as a question.
Yep. Through you, Madam Chair, in that case, then I'd recommend that you recommend to council tonight to deny the application then going forward. That could be done through a simple amendment. Mayor Todd or Mr. Hutton could put through an amendment to the motion to change it to say deny instead of adopt.
Okay.
Kim, are we an issue with the negative on that? No? Sorry, I just.
With an advisory committee, something still has to rise to council, right? It can go in a report for information that the PAC did deny the application through motion at the meeting, and then council can make the final decision at their meeting on July 6th.
Okay. Jim, you had a comment?
I was just going to move that we amend the recommendation to a denial.
Okay, and you moved,
I'll support that as a friendly amendment as the seconder.
okay. So all in favor of then denying this application with yeah, all in favor of denying this application? Okay, carried. Okay, moving along, is there any, next on the agenda is the new business? Okay, and before I see none, so before we hit the last agenda item of adjournment, I would like to thank Tracy and David again for your time and your efforts and your care and for our community. And could I have somebody move an adjournment, please? Thank you, Brett. Second by Leanne. All in favor? Perfect. I wish everyone a nice evening, peaceful, and stay healthy. Thank you.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Take care all.
Take care.
Night, everyone.